Throughout World War II, there were abounding women who angry to assignment central of the absorption camps to become abominable guards who would agreeably execute ache and annihilation prisoners who were actuality captivated in abhorrent conditions. Some of these women became guards absolutely for money, and they were adapted to become monsters during the training action that the SS put them through. Women such as Maria Mandel accomplished these adolescent women on how to become brutes and alike Irma Geese. The woman who was afterwards accepted as the hyena of Auschwitz was reprimanded for initially assuming too abundant affection to the inmates. But at the end of World War II, there were a cardinal of women who were brought to Boulogne, and they were accused of war crimes and crimes adjoining humanity. Central of the affected of Stutthof, which was activate in Gdansk, were a accumulating of adolescent women guards, and these were afterwards approved for their alarming accomplishments, oral decide. These women included a 24-year-old who seemed, in the attorneys added, agitated about her beard, and the actuality she took abundant joy in flirting with the guards. She showed absolutely no anguish for her crimes, and the Admirable Bogey, as she was nicknamed, was a curse to afterlife for her assignment during the Second World War. Jenny Wanda. Barkmann was brought in advance of a huge army for her beheading, and on a massive gallows which had been complete on a acropolis abutting to the affected breadth she formed, she was accomplished first. The Apache, who was absolutely a aloft captive of the affected, captivated the asphyxiate about her neck, afore she was larboard on the gallows. But what accurately did Jenny Wanda Barkmann do that was so alarming that she bare to be accomplished at the end of the war? To abutment our approach, amuse accomplish abiding to subscribe. Jenny Wanda Barkmann was built in on the 30th May 1922 central of the German Burgel of Hamburg. She was actual adolescent aback the Nazis rose to bulge and was a jailbait aback Hitler bedeviled ascendancy of the nation. As Hitler came into power, there were huge expectations imposed aloft adolescent bodies central of Germany and the country. Adolescence groups were set up for boys and girls, and associates eventually became compulsory for these, and adolescent women abutting the BDM, the Alliance of German Girls or Maidens. This was their girls' edition of the Hitler Youth, and it became the alone acknowledged changeable adolescence organization in Nazi Germany. Teenagers age-old amid 14 to 18 became associates of the Alliance proper, but alike adolescent ones, age-old 10 to 14, were brought into the Adolescent Girls League. In this they were indoctrinated heavily, and there were 4.5 actor associates at its height. Girls in the accumulation were accomplished how to baker, and additionally how to access an accouchement and run a household. This is what the Nazis accepted for adolescent women. They capital them to accept as abounding accouchement as accessible for the Nazi Reich, so that sons would become associates of the Hitler adolescents and afresh soldiers, and daughters would echo the circle, arch to a citizenry boom. Girls additionally took allotment during the Second World War in the National Labor Service breath they completed assignment for the society. But Jenny Wanda Barkmann, afterwards agnosticism, would accept been a affiliate of the Alliance of German Girls, and she would accept been indoctrinated into the Nazi backroom and policies. The aloft baton of the accumulation claimed about the intentions of the Alliance of German Maidens that our bodies charge a bearing of girls which is advantageous in anatomy and mind, abiding and decisive, proudly and confidently activity forward, one which assumes its abode in accustomed activity with address and discernment, one chargeless of affected and admiring emotions, and which, for absolutely this reason, in acutely authentic femininity, would be the associate of a man, because she does not attention him as some array of idol, but rather as a companion. Such girls will then, by necessity, backpack the ethics of National Socialism into the abutting bearing as the brainy barrier of our people. Abounding of the adolescent women who thrived, central of the Alliance of German Maidens eventually went on to appetite to a lot added of their activity and time to the Nazi account, and some eventually abutting the Nazi account and women abutting the SS retinue. This was the accumulating of women who active up to do jobs for the SS whilst men were abroad fighting. The accumulation admiring women from all altered walks of activity, and eventually the affirmation was for women to become absorption-affected guards. The allurement of bigger pay and advanced central of the SS and an organization led to abounding women abrogation their jobs as hairdressers, agents or boutique administration, and they were beatific to altered absorption camps to afresh complete the aeon of compulsory training to become an offseer or a changeable overseer. Jenny Wanda Barkmann had been aloft by her ancestor, who was a dock worker, and the ancestors did not consistently accept so abundant money, but she had huge dreams. She capitaled to become an extra or a model, and afterwards accessory academy. She became an appearance archetypal, and she was accepted for her adorableness and her looks. However, whilst the war was ongoing, admitting her links to the Nazi groups, she connected to appear photo shoots for the German appearance magazines, and she featured in abounding altered advertisements. But article afflicted in her mind, and it may accept been the conduct she faced as an adolescent woman in the Nazi adolescence groups. In 1944, Jenny Wanda Barkmann volunteered with the SS to become a changeable guard, and she was a fresh beatific to the Stutthof absorption-affected central of the Burgel of Gdansk to conduct her training period. Stutthof was the aboriginal German absorption-affected that was accustomed al fresco German borders during World War II, and it opened on the 2nd September 1939. Aloof a day afterwards, the Nazi aggression of Poland began. It would additionally become the final absorption. Affected that was absolved on the 9th May 1945. There were about 110,000 prisoners who were beatific to the affected during the time that it was in operation, and it afflicted decidedly during the war, and additionally broadcast on a colossal extent. In January 1942, it became a approved absorption affected, and there were altered genitalia of the site. There was the old affected amidst by a alpine acid wire fence captivation 8 billet, and additionally apartment for the SS guards, but afresh. The new affected was created amidst by an electrified acid wire fence, and this had 30 billet, and additionally a gas alcove and crematoria were congenital in 1943 to backpack out accumulation exterminations of the captive population. The affected was staffed by German SS guards and the aboriginal changeable guards, accustomed at the affected in 1942, and about 295 women formed there. The altitude of Stutthof were acutely boxy and barbarous, and dozens of bags of bodies died from starvation, ache, and at the calmly of the guards. Lots died from the typhus epidemics that swept throughout the camp. And if the prisoners were not fit abundant to assignment and conduct adamantine labor afresh, they would be beatific to the camp's baby gas alcove breadth. They were killed. Executions connected throughout Stutthof's time in operation for archetype in 1944. 4,000 prisoners died central of the gas alcove in the affected, including women and children. Abounding of these alleged to be collapsed by the women bouncer force. The prisoners were affected to assignment abundantly adamantine, and abounding German companies utilized the bondservant labor assignment force, and the inmates were ordered to do assignment that benefited the German war accomplishment, authoritative accoutrements, and genitalia for Luftwaffe aircraft. Because of all the terror, about 65,000 bodies died in Stutthof. As the war went on, there was a charge for abounding changeable guards to assignment at Stutthof, and a cardinal of macho guards were beatific to the advanced curve to go and action abnormally, as the German war accomplishment was dwindling. Central the bounded breadth of Gdansk advertisements were beatific out in the bounded breadth, and they were answered by bounded women. Jenny Barkmann at Stutthof anesthetized her interviews, and she underwent the training aeon advancing through this about easily. She may accept been admiring to this for the money she accustomed in pay, and additionally for the advance opportunities. Barkmann, whilst she formed at Stutthof bound, got ashore into the atrocity of the bouncer agents at the site. She was accepted for actuality abominably atrocious and additionally sadistic. She was accepted for a life central of the changeable affected at Stutthof, and she additionally was witnessed a cardinal of times assault women prisoners with her own calmly and afresh, battering them so abominably that they about died. She bent the inmates in abounding altered ways, and some added guards who had formed at the affected for abundant best were alike abashed by the accomplishments of a woman who became accepted as Mad Jenny because of her actions. The added appellation that she had was the Beautiful Spectre. One aloft captive of Stutthof afterwards claimed about the altitude of the affected that we were aboriginal in a banter together. Best of the billet were a lath stable. You've apparent that, 3 bodies to a bunk. In the centermost there were 4 bunks. The horse blanket, the gray blankets that we alleged horse blankets were so rough. In any case, you got 1 to a bunk. You do me a favor and acquaint me how you allotment that, 3 bodies to a bunk. Nobody knew how to allotment it. The cardinal of inmates decreased. Bodies died like flies. We were afresh faced with this abridgment of water, abridgment of lavatories. There were latrines appropriate over in the fields. They were aloof holes in the ground. You couldn't see in the dark. You were abashed to abatement into them. It was glace abnormally aback the winter came and it all froze over. You got a mug of coffee. I consistently say this atramentus baptized that was alleged coffee and afterwards that you adored some to ablution yourself. You accept actual acceptable intentions at first. You absolutely anticipate your activity to bathe your mouth. Dental hygiene is actual important. It wasn't a fresh because you absolutely charge the aqueous in your body. So cleanliness goes to hell. Food you haven't got that would sustain you. Afterwards, the aboriginal brace of days. You were actuality lined up to go to assignment or by that time. Some looked worse afresh and so the cardinal got smaller. One of the best barbarian accomplishments that Barkmann got complex in was the selections. Stutthof to activate with did not accept a gas alcove at the camp. Instead, those who were called to be abolished were beatific to added sites to be slaughtered. Aback the gas alcove was constructed. A cardinal of the guards were complex in selecting prisoners to be dead in the chamber. Those who were too anemic to work, or who had slight injuries were bound marched into the chamber. But Jenny Barkmann was one of the guards who took genitalia in the selections, and she chose hundreds of women and accouchement to be taken into the gas alcove to be killed. This would afterwards appear aback to abode her, and she collected some of the prisoners in with her own hands. She was additionally amenable for battering women with her whip and added weapons, but like so abounding added aloft absorption affected guards. As the war angry joined the Germans and during the aborticide processes of the camps, Wanda Barkmann fabricated a run for it, and she knew she would, if captured, be brought to a balloon at the end of the war. She was in the bounded breadth of Gdansk, abundantly bolter, and abounding were analytic for her as Stutthof was actuality evacuated. Jenny Barkmann hid out, and she remained in the bounded breadth until May 1945. She was not the best able with her escape attempt, and whilst aggravating to Latha alternation to leave Gdansk, apparently to arch back to Hamburg, her hometown, she was arrested and seized. Images of her had been broadcast in the bounded area, and descriptions of her had been beatific all over Europe. Her angel, whilst was taken in the affected, was alike circulated. Someone had helped her hiding. But during her interrogations, Barkmann shockingly claimed that she had consistently advised the prisoners of the affected able-bodied, and she said that she had never advised anyone poorly, displayed any abandon or dead a prisoner. She additionally shockingly said that she had alike helped some prisoners who were craving heavily, assuming herself as a savior for the helpless. But the interrogators knew that she was lying, but one of her Bastille guards absolutely fell in adulation with her, and he would let her out of her corpuscle for abbreviate periods of time. But afterwards, the bouncer saw the accompaniment of some of the prisoners who Jenny Barkmann had mistreated. The admirable woman in his aegis afresh became a monster in his eyes. Wanda Barkmann was brought to the Stutthof trials, and this acknowledged proceeding brought a cardinal of aloft guards of the affected in advance of the attorneys to acknowledgment for their actions. Documents and attestant affidavit was aggregate adjoin her, and the attorneys were told all about her crimes. Her advocate saw a way of accepting her off the afterlife penalty, and he approved to affirmation that Mad Jenny was in actuality batty and clumsy to angle balloon, not actuality fit to do so. But the attorneys did not buy this, and she came beyond abundantly cold. Back images were apparent of the accompaniment of Stutthof affected. Jenny laughed, and she spent added of her time flirting with the macho guards of the attorneys and arena with her beard than she did assuming any anatomy of anguish at all. She laughed aback assemblage testified, and it did not booty continued for the board to adjudge her to death. She forth with a cardinal of added women were bedeviled to death, and the executions would be conducted swiftly. The final words that Jenny Barkmann accurate in advance of the board was, "Life is absolutely a abundant pleasure, and amusement as a aphorism does not after most long." On the 4th of July 1946, the beheading abode was set for the accursed guards of Stutthof Absorption Camp. Ariel on Biskupia Gorka Acropolis in the Burgle of Gdansk, a massive army of bags of bodies had gathered. A huge set of gallows had been created on the hillside, and there were bristles gallows which stood aerial aloft the crowd. They were fabricated so big that anybody could see, and it was actuality breadth the aloft guards of Stutthof would be executed. The changeable guards were aggregate together, and the aboriginal who was accomplished was Wanda Barkmann, who was aloof 24 years old. She was led out in advance of the huge crowd and was taken a pier a barter which had been backed up beneath the gallows. Stood on the back of the barter was a cardinal of admiral and an executioner, who was absolutely a loft captive of Stutthof. For some of these executions, the executioners absolutely wore their striped pajama uniforms of the absorption camps. An official apprehend out audibly the afterlife book, and he categorical the crimes of Jenny Wanda Barkmann, and the army gasped in horror. She was sat on a stool whilst this happened, and afresh she was ordered to angle, and the Apache threw the asphyxiate over the gallows structure, and afresh captivated the bend in their hand. Barkmann had the asphyxiate afresh befuddled over her arch, and this was anchored about her neck. There was no atramentous awning or cap placed over her arch, and afresh the Apache, whilst Barkmann was stood on the stool, banged on the roof of the barter that they were stood on. This gave the disciplinarian the arresting that it was time to drive off. Slowly the barter, confused, advanced, and as this happened, Barkmann was larboard blind on the gallows. She was struggling, blame and asthmatic for air, as it was afraid out of her, and afterwards sometime her anatomy afresh went bending, and she twitched a few times afore she went stiff. She was the aboriginal accomplished that day. Jenny Wanda Barkmann was aloof. 24 years old, aback she was accomplished. Acceptation that she was about 22 years old. Aback she committed alarming crimes central of Stutthof Absorption Camp. She was one of abounding changeable guards who approved atrocity and who beatific prisoners agreeably to their deaths, central of the baby gas alcove oral the site. Barkmann was accepted as the admirable bogey, and abounding prisoners could not accept how a woman who was as acceptable, attractive as she was, and as adolescent as she was, could become a assassin and a slaughterer. She was for her crimes accomplished in advance of a huge crowd, and she is remembered alongside women such as Irma Greasy for her barbarous accomplishments during World War II. Acknowledgement for watching. To abutment our approach, amuse accomplish, abiding to subscribe. Once a fresh acknowledgement for watching.